All right, it is Monday, August 16th, 2021. I am Jim Vessel. Welcome to Competitive Corner. We are back, and I'm joined by my lovely host, Alex McDougall. Alex, glad to be back. Glad to see you there. How are you?
Doing great. It's raining here, which is really needed where I am living.
Yeah, it is raining in Vancouver, too. For those of you that don't know, British Columbia, which is the province we live in, is currently in the sixth circle of wildfire hell. So we've had the worst air quality actually in all of the world last week due to wildfires and smoke. Not to mention the fact that it's hot as fuck, and we haven't had rain in like forever. So really excited to hear that there's lots of rain happening. Yeah, Kamloops is fucked again. All right, guys, we got a packed show for you. We're going to be talking about lots of fun stuff. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about Charity Hammer. Me and Alex were both there. We're going to be talking about the Codex roadmap, the submarine drama from the last few weeks, our Thousand Suns and Grey Knights initial thoughts, what we thought about the US Open, and then a general look at the meta. And then, as always, we will be taking viewer questions. So, how to get a question on Competitive Corner? Well, it's really simple. You can either join the Deployment Zone TV Discord. Deployment Zone TV is essentially the Netflix of Warhammer. So it's like a platform run by guys like Winter SEO. And they have a ton of different content creators, including Den of Imagination. I believe Vanguard Taxis is on there now. Play on Tabletop, and they're doing lots of exclusive stuff. We actually do an exclusive episode of Competitive Corner there once a month. So next week's episode will be exclusive to Deployment Zone TV. You can also leave a comment on today's show, in which case we will answer it in next week's episode. Or you can join the the Duplicity Studio Discord. The link is down below. And finally, you can ask it live. So at the end of the show, I will let you guys know when we're taking questions. And you can, you can ask them in there. Jazzright, you can definitely get an update on my dating life. We will save that for the end of the show towards the end when most of the competitive stuff has gone through. But yeah, I mean, you can ask that as a question as part of our questions, because we don't actually determine which questions we'll get through. So feel free to ask that during Q&A. All right, Alex, before we get into it, how the hell are you? How you been? And what's going on? It's been 3 weeks. Where have you been?
I have not gone anywhere since Charity Hammer. I guess, although 3 weeks, yeah. So you're including even before Charity Hammer. Yeah, no, my life was nothing, and then it was Charity Hammer, and then it was nothing again. So yeah, just like COVID all the time.
And how are you feeling coming back from Charity Hammer? Because I knew one of two things would happen. Either I would be kind of burned out, and I would go to Charity Hammer feeling like, because I hadn't really played a lot up to Charity Hammer, I would go to Charity Hammer, get my ass pushed in, which I did mostly, and then come home and kind of feel dejected a little bit. Or I would come home and feel like super enthused and like ready to kind of jump back into everything. And that was going to be like kind of the shot in the arm that I needed. So how are you feeling coming home from Charity Hammer?
I feel really good coming home from Charity Hammer. I felt a little bad in the beginning. I went like 0-4. Although one of those games I got bust in the team game, and I knew that was coming. But then I turned it around. I went like 6 in a row, like 6-0. So I was like,
you played 10 games?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was good though. Like even when I was losing, like, I mean, I lost to Admech, played by a very competent player. I lost to John Lennon. Big fucking deal.
Who's that? I've never heard of him.
I lost to Colin in a horrible matchup that I was always destined to lose. Can't remember my other loss, but like they were expected losses. And then, yeah, it all turned around. I started winning a bunch of my games and just started feeling better about it. And overall, yeah, I just felt like I still got it, I guess. Yeah. Like I can still play well when push comes to shove. I really did feel like I needed to knock the rust off. Like my first game was pretty sloppy. And by game 10, I just felt like I'm playing well again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely felt the same way. Like I had low expectations for myself going into it, but as I was playing more games, I felt more and more confident, and just kind of getting back into the groove of playing after not playing for so long. I have been playing about one game every 2 weeks as part of our league, but to be honest, the level of competition, and you know this, we're, just so for everyone knows, me and Alex are in a BC 40K league, split up into divisions. The divisions are organized by like region. So oftentimes in any one division, you might only have like one or two players that are like at a high level or playing at a high level. A lot of the players are brand new, which was part of the point of the league. So it's not a bad thing, but a lot of the players are not like big tournament goers, big competitive players. So oftentimes my league games were not exactly like high skill level games. I actually played one game that I actually lost the game against Brandon. I think Brandon St. Pierre. And he's actually a really solid player. And he played Drukari against me, and I think I lost like it was like 76-74. Like it was a super tight game, but he ran this 5-6 raiders, just all the regular Drukari crap on a Dawn of War deployment, and it was just like it was just really hard to like I played my heart out, but it was just too much in the end. Like he had, I think at the end of the game, he had a 5-man rack unit and like 3 Kabalites. And I had like a PVC, a Demon Prince, like I had Exalted on Sorcerer. Like I had enough to probably kill him if we would have gone one more turn and win the game. But I just ran out of gas at the end, and he was just able to get enough points early on where I had to play a lot more conservative. And I couldn't come back in the end. I just didn't have enough to get him off. And the problem too is like they just have so much OBSEC, right? Like everything good is OBSEC. So I just wasn't able to kind of, even though I was like winning the killing game and winning the kind of like the trading game a little bit, I couldn't get onto the objectives. And I had a few really bad, like I had a 10-man Scarab Cult unit. They lost like 6 to Jazar. I rolled a 1 for my test. I lost a 1 to my, I killed Jazar. I lost a 1 on my, I rolled a 1 on my morale, and then rolled double 1 on for my remaining 2 models. And had I just kept 1 model, like it would have won the game. Like and you know what I mean? It was stuff like that happening where I was just like brutal dice rolls, and I was just like, now I'm fearless, thank God, in the 9th edition book. So we're gonna talk about that. So that'll never happen to me again, which I'm very excited about. And we will talk a little bit more about Charity Hammer later in the show. But first thing I wanted to talk about is the Codex roadmap. And I know we both kind of have our thoughts on this. And I have the largest mountain of salt to talk about. But tied into this Codex roadmap, I also want to talk a little bit about what the solution is, because I think it's easy for us to just sit here and bitch to GW. And I did actually have a good Twitter exchange with Tom Layton, who's in chat, so about kind of our thoughts on this. And there's actually one of the questions that have been asked in the Discord was essentially, what is our ideal scenario? This is by Sam Lemon. He asked, what is our ideal scenario for the Codex releases for Games Workshop? So I kind of want to tie all those things together and just have like one big segment on the Codex roadmap. But Alex, first, let me hear your thoughts on it before I lose my temper.
Yeah, this isn't a roadmap. This is nothing. This is literally no new information. Like, okay, so the first one was literally 2 codexes that have already been released.
Yeah, people have the codex in their hands, and they're like, here's the roadmap. Yeah. It's like, thanks.
And then another codex that has also already been released, but poorly, like in a limited edition kind of bullshit. So people already have it, but some people didn't because they didn't shell out for the big Beast Snagga box. And then they just miss a month. I guess nothing comes out in October or whatever, which is hilariously stupid. I don't know what's happening there. And then we get one codex with a name that we kind of already knew was coming. They've been hinting at Black Templar for a while now. That's not actually 2 months that surprising.
since the big reveal preview, 40k previews they had in the summer. We knew Black Templars are coming out.
Exactly. And then 2 new codexes with no name on them. That's like company that makes product continues to release product. What the fuck?
I think so. Like, yeah. I mean, I don't need to add much more to what you're saying as far as like what they've done. But I think that my biggest issue is like, look, if they want to release that and say, hey guys, here's kind of the like update on stuff, I don't mind. But do not like hype it up as a roadmap, and then like a roadmap actually tells you where you're going. This didn't tell us where we're going. It told us where we already knew we were, right? In the first 3 books. Everyone knew Black Templars was going to be next, right? And everyone knew that at some point more codexes would be out. That's essentially what they've said. They're like, here's codexes we released. Here's another codex we told you we're going to release. And then guess what? In the future, more codexes were coming. In fact, the roadmap actually is annoying because it actually tells us that they're just not when they're not releasing stuff. So they should be doing 2 codexes a month, October, November, December, to get us caught up, because we all knew Thousand Suns and Grey Knights were supposed to be out before chapter approved, and they were not. So they're actually like old codexes, right? Now, don't get me started on this orc release. So just so everyone knows, we actually have a tournament coming up in about 3 weeks, I guess, called Attack X, 4 weeks. And the TOs made a decision, which I actually think is the right decision, right? To not allow the new orc codex until it's actually released. So when you're going to release, so the whole point, the whole like idea of a limited release codex, then to actually release the codex like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it's gonna be like almost 2 months later, is like the most inane marketing and product release decision I've ever heard of. Like, especially in the context of this game, right? This isn't the case of like, hey, you can get a hardback of a, like, so novels do this, right? You get a hardcover novel, and then sometime a year later you can get a softcover. But guess what? You can buy that hardcover all the way up to the point where the softcover is released, and you can get an audiobook of the hardcover. Like, it's available, right? So even though there's 2 different like releases, you can still have access to that book. In this case, we have a limited edition orc box, which many people did not get, right? And then we're not getting an actual codex for orcs until after Thousand Sons of Grey Knights. Now, am I grateful that we got Thousand Sons of Grey Knights? Of course I am. But those are also old releases that they snuck in. But is there any reason that this book, when it's literally just the book and a few other kits, couldn't have been out before? Not really. I mean, don't tell me that they don't have a warehouse full of those books at this point.
Yeah.
And like,
the really dumb part,
you know, the
is
argument,
the book should be first.
yeah, and like the argument could be made, okay, we'll let players run like a PDF copy, right? But not every player has access to that. Like me and you have access to those books, and lots of unscrupulous players like us will have access to pirated copies, right? But like the majority of players probably don't have access to that. Like, it's not that common. It seems like to us competitive players at the high end, we get access to those books literally the day. Like I had PDF scans of the Thousand Sons of Grey Knights books like a week ago, and I literally just got my physical copy today, right? So, like, I've been reading that book since the Saturday of Charity Hammer. As soon as the embargo lifts, we get the copies. We have copies we're literally looking at Charity Hammer. But a lot of players don't have access to that. Like, they're not in those circles, right? And even in like some of the chats a lot of the like competitive players were like, hey, anyone know where to get a copy of this? Because they know that's out there. And like, I don't want to play at a tournament where the guy shows up with a bunch of freaking like printed out PDF scans, right? Like, it's just like, and then like things like Battlescribe often are not updated. Now Battlescribe is updated. So it's just like a really poor idea. Now, what do I think the solution is? Okay. So there's been lots of talk about the solution to this, and I had, as I mentioned earlier, I had a bit of back and forth with Tom on it on Twitter. First of all, I want to be clear, what I'm proposing is never going to happen. So is it even a solution if it's like a pipe dream? Probably not. But I could tell you how I would want this codex release schedule to work anytime there's a new edition, right? So anytime there's a new edition, there should be an index release, right? Even if none of the books get up, all the books are getting updated, or there should be a and that index release could literally just be like a points update and then like some errata updates. Like, it doesn't have to be the full codexes. It could be like, hey, here is for all the 9th edition books. So just like they released a chapter approved, or like a Imperial Armor Xenos or whatever, or Imperial Armor for Forge World, they could release a kind of like 9th edition codex amendum thing for free, and that's going to have FAQ and errata for all of the 8th edition books. So that right away brings all of the 8th edition books into 9th edition, and that could include things like keyword updates, errata, could include things like secondaries, faction secondaries, so that it's like kind of a even playing field for everyone. Could include some very basic updates, like 2 wound fucking Space Marines for Chaos and Space Marines, right? So it could include those basic things just to get everyone kind of up to that level, that 9th edition level. And then as the new codex is released, which should be on a, and guess what? All this needs to be available digitally, right? So that so this is, first of all, it has to be digital. And they can do a paper copy at some point, but it's got to be digital. That's the one thing that I got to be really clear. Second, they release this like index errata, just like they do for when they release like the 15 FAQ documents when they do for the big FAQs, and they do their rulebook one, they do a chapter proof one, and they do ones for every codex. Something similar like that, but for all the 8th edition books, right? That gets us into, it gets everyone a foot in the door into 9th edition, gives the Chaos Space Marines 2 wounds, gives us all faction secondaries. But other than that, maybe doesn't change, maybe updates points, but doesn't change a ton, right? Updates keywords, adds like things like aura or certain stratagem, whatever. That's the first step. Second step is all books should go through public beta test. So just like we had the Sisters Codex, and the Sisters Codex had a public beta test where it was kind of rules were sent out essentially to the player base. All codexes should go through that period, no matter what, right? So they're going to release, say, the next 4 codexes. All 4 of those codexes should get a beta test period where there's a feedback session from the general public. And so those rules are out in the wild. People can play with those rules. They're not tournament ready. And then once those rules are kind of updated, erratas caught, all those things, they're finalized, and then they're released digitally, right? And then a paper copy maybe comes down 4 to 6 months down the road whenever the printing stuff happens. Maybe that comes out with the kits that come out at that time, right? Or they don't include any new data sheets in those beta codexes. And then when the paper copy comes out and the kits come out, they update the digital with the new data sheets. Plus you get your paper copy with the new data sheets as well. Like something along those lines. So with the digital distribution, you don't have to include any units that aren't released yet, right? Because you could say that, hey, this is a new unit coming up. We can just add that into the digital codex because it's all digital now. So that data sheet appears now all of a sudden. So that's the second thing. Third, there's a beta test, right? Fourth, when there's if they want to do a physical copy, and this is why I don't think they should do physical copies, they should be delinked. You should have a lore and art and painting book called, like, I don't know, Codex Sisters, and that has lore and painting and art, but it has crusade rules maybe, right? But it has no data sheets and no points, and it has no like stratagems. It has none of the actual gaming rules, right? So now, guess what that also does? It means I don't have to buy a new one of those every edition, because they can now only reprint that every 2 editions. Only when that army gets new kits or needs an actual update, because that lore, like, think about it. I have there's 9 editions or 8 editions or 10 editions of fucking Codex Chaos Space Marines. Do I need to read about fucking Abaddon the Despoiler every single edition, a big data entry? Do I need to read about the fucking Horus Heresy 8 times in 8 different kind of ways? Like, they're basically just plagiarizing their own content. So why don't you guys release a faction specific lore art and paint book that comes out, and then that only gets updated every like 6 years or every 8 years or whenever it actually needs to get updated, because there's a big release with new kits and new stuff for that edition, and there's a bunch of new lore that they want to put in. Now what I've done is, for people that really want that codex, they want that like fluff, they want that all that stuff, it's still there, they can get it. And then for people that want the rules, it's delinked from that whole process, and we don't have to buy that physical book. Like, if I still am interested in that, what's the point of me buying like my Codex Death Guard and my 7th edition 8th edition Codex Death Guard? All the shit is basically the same. It's like, make it the same but change it, right? They take it and they fucking, rearrange some of the stories, and it's just regurgitating the same stories. So I'm rereading the same stuff. Now, obviously, when there's new rules, new units, they add a bit more fluff. But again, these things can happen. These don't need to be linked to the rule release, right? These could be like a completely separate thing. So you do that process, and then on top of that, by doing a public beta, you could either release all of the rules for all of the books at once, right? So people can see, kind of work on all of them, or you could do it in, say, batches of 6 or batches of 4. And then you need to shrink that release schedule for the digital rules to like a year maximum. So like from the start of 9th edition to the final codex coming out, it's 1 year, right? So every 3 months you get 4 books, right? Or 6 books, or whatever it takes to finish all the factions. Or maybe it's even longer than that. Maybe it's like slightly more than a year. But all of a sudden, your edition gets updated very quickly. You're gonna get the ability to change things like after the fact if we discover later on that things are broken. And we're going to get into that in a sec, because guess what? There's been a Drukari FAQ, there's been an AdMech FAQ, and those armies are still at a 20% plus T-Whip and still destroying the meta. And they're not going to get another FAQ to get them brought into balance until, guess what? The next chapter approved, which is probably at least another 6 to 8 months away. So the meta is going to be fucked for another 6 to 8 months, because whoever wrote those books just didn't know what the fuck they're doing. Sisters are still top tier. Orcs have gotten some wins as well. So my point is like, to make this a better game, right? You have to make some changes to your process. On top of that, like, your distribution needs to change, right? Like how they distribute it, which is going digital. There needs to be beta testing, public beta testing, 100%. Because your playtesters, they ain't it, man. Like if we can have Drukhari and AdMech get through, and the devs write those books, the playtesting ain't it, right? Like the playtesting isn't enough. It's not doing it. You guys need more feedback, more people looking at it. Sorry?
They're not listening. They're not listening.
Well, even if they were, like, here's the thing. I know that they're not listening to the playtesters, and I know a lot of people like to shit on the playtesters. They don't listen to playtesters. I've talked to a lot of them. Alex talks to lots of them. Most of us know some playtesters. They don't listen to them. But my point is like, there's not that many of them, right? What they need is the whole community reading and going through these books and like editing them and like updating, like going through that beta, right? And then giving that feedback and having a lot of eyes on it, not just one. And then once those books come out, if they're digital, guess what? If they fuck up, it's a lot easier to update. Like they could do a monthly patch cycle, right? Where every month they do, at the end of the month, there's like a balance pass, or every 3 months or something just a little bit more reasonable, right? Every 3 months there's a balance pass, right? They tweak a point, they tweak a rule, they add an errata, whatever. So that way the game is constantly in a better place. Now, instead what we're going to get is 3 more books for the rest of the year, essentially. We're going to get Black Templars and then the 2 mystery books, which I'm hearing is Custodes and Genestealer are called. That's what the rumors mill saying. How accurate that is, we'll see. We'll see. But that's what little birdies are telling me. And then who knows? They're saying it's going to be a banner year for Chaos Space Marines. What? They're going to reprint the Chaos Space Marine book a 4th time? Is that what they mean by banner year? Like, I can't anymore. So
is 2022 their year?
Yeah.
No, what you described is definitely a pipe dream. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, and then
Digital
on top of that,
it.
they need to hire a solid fucking editing team, and they need to hire like if they want to have internal playtesters and not beta tests, they need to expand that team and invest a lot, like triple the team of playtesters, triple their team of editors, and invest a lot more in testing. And it can't be like when you do QA testing for like a video game, you're literally given a fucking list of shit to go through. Like go try this level 13 times and try to break this specific thing, right? Or go do this thing, and you got to go through a checklist to check all these things to make sure they work. It's a very methodical a very methodical process when you do QA for like video games or other kinds of games. Like they don't just say, here's some rules, go play with them and do whatever, right? So if they're going to do playtesting, it needs to be a lot more like, hey, go play this army and play it against these 12 armies, and report back the game. And these it can't just be like, hey, go and write like you know what I'm saying? Like there's got to be more method to it, and they got to invest way more money into their playtesting department, because it's just, you get like, the game is just in a bad place right now, I think. And I'm not seeing enough movement on Games Workshop. They're just so fucking slow to do anything about it. And only when the public outcry is like at a crescendo where people are literally like this is fucked, are they going to do anything? And look, AdMech got their FAQ. They just won US Open. Like, we'll go through the tournament results. Do you know the only armies that won tournaments last week were armies with like new books, basically? So which is like expected, but like it's a lot of AdMech and Drukhari, I'll tell you that. And Sisters. And we all know those are the S tier books, right? Those are the best books.
Yeah, and even then, like, there's still a gap between Sisters, AdMech, and Drukhari. Like, I think Sisters are great, and I think they're like a little overpowered, but like not unreasonably so. But compared to Drukhari and AdMech, it's not even a comparison.
I agree, but what we've also seen is that in the right hands, like John has been piloting that Sisters list, they're fucking they're unstoppable, right? There's a lot there that is like, I think that is deeper in that army, especially with the miracle dice, the way that you can use miracle dice and the way that there's combos with some of the different units, that I think it's like not as obvious as AdMech, where it's like, put it on the board, put your buffs up, and then just shoot things off the table.
And I think that's a lot of the issue with it. Like, yes, okay, obviously Sisters can be piloted at an extremely high level, but it takes work and it takes depth. Like, it does take a high understanding of the game to get the max value out of it, instead of people just literally being able to go, well, here's 80 Rangers and Vanguard, and you don't get to interact with me anymore.
Yeah.
Like I'm fairly confident that like a chimpanzee could run AdMech to a GT win.
Yeah. I mean, Tom makes a really good point. Like they're not good in the hands of like a mid-level player. When
Exactly.
they're good in the hands of like they're hard to master, but when you master them, they're incredibly strong. It's just like something like Craft Worlds, right? Like people always count out Eldar, but like when you put him in Sean Naden's hands, he's just able to do magic with them, right? Like, and I'm not saying that like every book, but here's the thing. All like, and this is kind of where I think there's an issue. If Games Workshop wants that kind of like mastery, like where it's like easy to learn, hard to master, then like all the books should follow that rule. But the problem is some don't. Like Drukari, no offense to Drukari players, they're so easy to play because they're so undercosted and they trade so well that even if you like run up a raider full of like both units of Incubi and Drazar and it all gets wiped out, you still have another like 1,800 points that will out trade your opponent, right? Like it's just like the trades are just so good that even if you do make big mistakes with Drukari, you just don't lose. You still like you have to make mistake after mistake, and you just trade so well, right? And they have so many tricks and ways to kind of recover from those things, that it's like hard. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sisters really remind me of back in the day when Gene Stealer Cult was powerful.
right.
Like Gene Stealer Cult was really strong. There for a while there, they were the strongest army in the game, but they were super hard to pilot. Like deciding when you were actually going to deep strike and your positioning was hugely important, and you could just get punished really hard. And I still feel like Sisters have that, and I think that's why people are kind of more okay with it. And also the win rate is just not nearly as strong, which is due to the fact that the army is harder to play. You can't just give some normally like 3 and 2 player sisters and they're going to go win a GT. But I think you can take a like competent 3-2 AdMech player and they'll just go and like crush some GT, no problem.
Yeah. All right. So just to summarize, well, not to summarize. You guys heard it. Listen to this segment if you want me to summarize. All right. I do want to address. So next, I want to talk about something that happened a few weeks ago, but we haven't had a chance to discuss it, and that is the submarine drama by Manny Shima at the Hellstorm tournament. I don't know what the name of the GT was, and then also talk about at the same time. I know it was last weekend, but Tom says that was last weekend, but I don't fuck man. The 40K community moves fast. Feels like it was like a year ago. But I want to address it because I have some thoughts on it, and I also want to kind of pair that with this idea of talking out scores because that's also been something that has kind of recent. I think since maybe that was even the week before that, the talking out score stuff, which also Manny was slightly involved in, kind of go together. But yeah, so just for everyone that doesn't know, there's kind of two concepts we're talking about. First is submarining, and submarining is a concept where generally the way that it works is you purposely like score low in some of your games by either walking off objectives or not killing as much as you should or letting some of your stuff die when you know you're going to win the game. So you get a lower score. And by getting a lower score, you might avoid playing some of the top players. Especially in a single elimination tournament, it doesn't matter how you win. It doesn't matter how many points you have. It just matters the win. So getting a low score game there's no problem there. Second, what happens sometimes when we talk about talking out is players will often get to a point in the game where it's very obvious who's going to win, and maybe one player is just not into it. He's just like not having a good time. Maybe it's just so obvious who's going to win. So instead of like wasting each other's time, essentially rolling dice for no particular reason, they'll just talk out the rest of the game, kind of theory craft essentially what could happen, and then just kind of give themselves a score accordingly. So on both those subjects, what are your thoughts, Alex? I'm really interested to hear.
Okay, so for submarining, obviously pretty scummy. Just play your game. If it ends up, if you think that you're gonna if you're gonna submarine and then try and play the top table anyway, like we'll just try and get to the top table. Don't try and if there's some player that you're worried about playing, and you're just like, oh, I'll maybe wait until round 5 to play them. Like just play your game and then play them whenever it shows up. The only time I've ever, I mean, I'm going to be honest here, which maybe people will think this is shady as well, but the only time I've ever manipulated my own scores is to dodge friends.
Yeah.
And that's not because I'm like, oh, I don't want to like lose or something. That was like, I've just driven 8 hours to another town. My friend got 81 points. I'm like, okay, so I'll try and get like 84 or something, because I didn't drive 8 hours to go and play the guy I play every single week.
And for those in the UK,
But
yes, we do drive 8 hours sometimes to events in Canada.
yes,
That
yes,
is a real thing. So before you guys like think he's making up a story, we do sometimes drive 8 hours for an event.
yeah. But like that's not really the same as like dodging like the best player there, or like intentionally trying to like lowball your whole way to the top.
Yeah.
As far as talking out, the only time I would kind of be okay with it is if the one player is literally just not wanting to play the game, and that's gonna like screw you over.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no, I'm done. I don't want to play the game anymore. And like, well, hold on. Like, you might actually just like sewer my chance to like win this GT or something. Or like, if there's going to be 2 undefeated people at the end, and you get like a 50 out of it because they call the game on turn 2.
Right.
That's. But again, like, I don't want to ask my opponent to like continue to suffer if they don't want to play the game. So usually if I ever do talk it out in that sense, I try to be as accurate as possible. I'm like, this is what I could actually do. Oh, I only got 3 units left on the board. Okay, well, I'm obviously not going to take like full engage points. So I will try to be as truthful as I think the score would be if my opponent had actually played the rest of the game. But if you guys come to time, which I know has been a lot of the issue that people are talking about, is like, oh, you both timed out on turn 3. Fuck you. Game's over, man. Don't count out any points. I don't give a shit. Like, if you guys can't manage your clock and you guys just timed out, like, no, you have whatever score you got.
Right. Yeah, so on the first case, I actually think there's 2 things to address. So first is it cheating? And the question is, in my eyes, absolutely not. So anyone that accused Manny of cheating for, like, essentially scoring low is incorrect, objectively. It's not against the rules. There's no rules that says you have to score the most points that you possibly can. There's no rules that, Tom I just said that. It's objectively not cheating. I don't think, now, do I think it's something that players should do? Do I think it's like let's say ethical? I mean, I don't think there's much to say there either, because look, at the end of the day, and we had a really good talk about gamesmanship on the Honest Wargamer. I had a really good conversation with Tom and Rob about gamesmanship. And for me, anything that you do outside of the actual game is kind of part of that gamesmanship. So it's like, what are the strategies that you can employ as a player to potentially increase the chances of you winning? Now, there's a lot of things that fall into that category. One of them being maybe like talking to your opponent a lot. One of them may be like, like being a little bit of like getting under their skin a little bit. Nothing like malicious, but just, like the comment here or there. Like, it's happened. Like, watch my game against Jeff Robinson at BAO. Like, he was very like intimidating. He was saying a lot of comments, and for me, I was like, as the player, I was like, like walking around the table, being physical, like physically intimidating your opponent. There's all sorts of like things that you can do to throw your opponent off mentally, which I actually personally don't think are against the rules, because as far as I'm concerned, as a player, it's your responsibility, like any kind of activity or sport, to be mentally prepared and mentally strong. And the difference between, say, like 2 sports teams sometimes isn't their skill on the table, it's their mental like who is able to stick with it and have like that mental toughness, right? Like, sometimes your ability as a player has nothing to do with your skill, or sorry, your ability to play is not just your skill, but it's also your mental toughness. Sorry, you were going to say something, Alex?
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes that mental toughness is being able to handle Alex Burrows skating around, giving you the finger and sticking his finger in your mouth.
Exactly. Right now, Alex Burrows, when he crosses that line into cheating or a penalty, he gets the penalty, and sometimes you get away with it. Now, should we allow that in 40K? Well, I don't know the answer to that. Like, I don't know if we want it to be to the point where players basically don't like, it's like chess, where like you don't talk to each other, where like the only conversation is like potentially information that you pass back and forth. Now, even in chess, because all the information you need is literally in front of you, there's literally no reason to talk. But there's lots of games that it is important to communicate something to your opponent. Should we get to the point where 40K is just like that? Yeah, he was Alex Burrows was like an agitator is the word we use in hockey. So someone that just literally goes around and gets in the opponent's face and gets them like frustrated, and then that gets them to like hit them back and then cause penalties on the other team.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's an agitator. But so in that sense, for me, something like submarining is more like gamesmanship than it is like any sort of like unsportsmanlike move or unethical. Now, here's the thing. There is very easy ways to do it that is not blatant. So like, and I will fully admit, there's been times where I have, I'm say on round 4 of my game, right? I look at my BCP scores. I see I'm in third. If I get a 100, or let's just use like current scores, even though this is 8th edition. If I get like a 90 more, I'll be in second and I'll be paired with, the first place. But if I get an 89, I'll be in 4th place and I will slow down. I won't necessarily like walk off objectives, let my own units die, but maybe I'll take my foot off the gas a bit and not score as many points, right? And that's for me being strategic. Now I'm gonna probably eventually play that player anyways in the final game or whatever. But for me, and I most players, if they're good, they can do that subtly enough where no one will know. Like, I'm not saying I'm just gonna run my units up and let them die and not get points. But like, if I look at that score and I don't want to play that player, right? I might not put the gas on. I might not kill a unit, or might charge something different, right? Like, I might move a unit off an objective to shoot something when keeping it on would actually probably net me more points. So again, it's not blatant where it's like, hey, I'm gonna just let all my units run into you and die, or I'm gonna run off all the objectives. But it's enough there that it's like subtle. Now, is that ethical? Is that something that we want players doing? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I think at the end of the day, unless it's against the rules, and unless it's like, I think, specifically banned, but then how do you prove that, right? Because I could do that same thing, but subtly and kind of secretly and not announce it and get away with it a lot. And lots of players probably do that right now and they don't talk about it. So how do you police that? I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to look at a game and say, hey, like, Jim, you didn't score as many points as you could have. You made decisions that caused you to score less points. Therefore, we think you're submarining. Therefore, we're going to like give you 0. Now, if I'd announced those things, sure, that's very obvious. I would say, hey, I'm going to do this so that I get less points, sure. But if you put in a rule like that, players are just going to do it secretly. They're just going to pretend that they made a dumb move, or, oh, it was just a mistake, I didn't realize it, or, oh, I wasn't thinking. So there's no real way to police it unless it's like so blatant like Manny did, right? So that's my first thought. So in that case, I just think it's good because it's impossible to police. I think it's impossible to make a rule. Now, where the conversation should go there is, should the system reward that, right? And I think the answer is no. We should be creating a system, a tournament matching system, where players want to get the most amount of points, right? And in that sense, that's why there's people talking about like randomized pairings after the win-loss draw. We talk about things like battle points. This is why I really, really like the 20-0 system, right? Because you want to get as many points in every round as possible. In case you lose, means you're still in the game, right? Because if I just looked at I think it was the West Coast GT in Sweden, I think, and the number 2 player got a 0 in one of his games, but he got a 20, a 20, and a 19, and he came in second. So he got 1-0, he got 20-0'd opposite, but he still came second, right? And then the top player got like a 15, a 16, a 15, a 17, a 16. Like, he didn't end up winning every game big, but he ended up winning all his games. And then it kind of went. So I actually like that system to disincentivize that. So I actually think all tournaments should go to a 20-0 system. In that sense, personally, I think it's a superior system, because it means you always have something to fight for in every game. Now, I also do like win-loss draw. So I don't like the idea that like undefeated players end up playing like, even if they got a 20-0, then they like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so if it could be like win-loss draw and a 20-0 system combined, I think that would be nice, or something along those lines. Randomized pairings would be nice. So I think there's a solution here. So that's the first thing. The second question I asked was regarding the what was it? The talking out of scores. So that's my thoughts on the Manny drama. I don't think he did anything wrong. Was it distasteful? Was it like not in the spirit of the game? Maybe, right? That argument could be made. But unless you guys are going to put that into the pack and into the code of conduct or whatever for your event, then don't penalize players for it, because there's lots of players doing it, just a lot more subtly, right? I bet you.
Let's talk about how it was handled, though.
What's that?
Because I let's talk about how it was handled, though. I think that's really important. So first of all, it was so extreme. It was really obvious. He like tabled him and then just moved off the objectives. But he also, now again, this is from other word of mouth. I did not look into this because it just doesn't fucking interest me. But apparently he went and bragged about it, which is not okay. And then his apology was super half-assed. It was like kind of an apology. Like somebody else that I know put it really well, I think, where if you beat somebody like that and then just sewer all your points and just barely win, it's very like it's turning your opponent into like a tool. Like, I'm just using you to get to the top. My game with you does not matter. I don't care about my game with you. It's very dehumanizing for your opponent. And somebody showing up there for their first GT that just gets their shit pushed in and then kind of has the person like hold it over them. Like, I can beat you so easily. I don't even have to play the game for the rest of the game. They're never coming back. Like,
Oh, for sure, it's embarrassing.
We have to think about the other person and say, like, I think I'm just being an asshole here.
For sure, it feels bad and it's embarrassing, and I'm sure it's not fun as that other player to feel like not only did I get destroyed, but now this guy's like basically abusing the game that we had to like further his own ends. But I guess at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of like unfairness, right? Like, someone was saying that it's not super fair because end up playing a midfield player. But guys, this happens at all tiers, right? So a midfield player plays another midfield player and 20 knows him, and then Submarine's there, and he might play like a low tier player who's not prepared. So like there's no amount, like there's like every tier of players will experience this. Low tier brand new players will experience it with mid-tier players. Mid-tier players will experience it with better players. Like, it's not like a thing that only good players do to like mid-tier players. At all levels of the game, you're gonna have these skews. You know what's not fair? That any player has to play someone that's way better than them at any point. Like you can't make the argument that it's unfair that you have to play a good player at some point, because in a random matchup, the first round you're often playing a good player, or sometimes you play an easy player. Is that fair for me to play like a guy that's played one game of 40k in the round one? I mean, it's not fair for him. But that's the way the tournament rules are. Now, if that happens in the first round or in the fourth round, does it really make a difference? My first game at LVO last year, guess who I got to play? I got to play one of the guys that went to the top 8. So like, and I lost. So I literally lost my first game playing an incredibly hard opponent. Now, I ended up winning all the rest of my games, but like the guy was playing Raven Guard, Centurion bombs with like snipers against like my character-based heavy chaos list. Like, I literally didn't have a chance in that game. And was it fair that I had to play that list round one and a really good player? I mean, who knows, right? But like, we can't make that judgment and say like, oh, look, if you're going to play in a competitive event, you're going to play players that are better than you at the start, middle, or end. Doesn't matter when. Even in the finals, is it fair that I have to play someone like John Lennon that has 4 times as many? Like, I would say that I'm a mid-tier player compared to like John Lennon or Richard right now because of the amount of games I've played. So is it fair that I have to play those guys? I mean, eventually it will happen. So I don't want to make a judgment.
Play them, you can ask if they treat you with respect. And
right.
not, like,
and here's the thing.
Your face as they kick your ass.
I know me personally, when I play a game, I would much rather play someone, if I'm going to lose, I'd much rather lose to someone that's much better than me, that can like teach me, that I can really see that like high level that gameplay and learn a lot from that game, than like play someone that like just barely beats me and I don't learn a lot. Like, that's just me personally. I'd always much rather learn from my losses and play someone better than me, and that's what makes me a much better player. I don't become a better player when I play a Drukhari and I just, the book just beats me, right? And it's like, it's a similar level player. Although there's things you don't learn as much, right? So on the second point of talking it out, the thing that people need to understand is you can't force someone to play a game, right? So I played a scrim game against the Orcs at Charity Hammer, and after turn 3, I looked at the board, or I think it was like turn 4, and I was like, let's just call it there because there's no way I can win this game. Now, we're not playing in a tournament. We're not playing in a big event. It was just like a scrim game. So like, there wasn't anything on the line. It wasn't hurting anyone. But like, there's no point in me playing that game at that point because I'm just not going to win, and I'm not. And it was a close game. And I just wanted to play that game to see the new Orcs. Now, my first game in the tournament, I played an impossible to win game. And I told you about this. I played on Hammer and Anvil against double Hierodual, 6 Hive Guard, and he had his Hive Guard on the objective with a obscuring like thing in front of the Hive Guard, so they could basically reach into my deployment zone, and Gene Seer called. So he had all this anti-deep strike, and my whole army was deep strike. I had 4 units of that deep struck. So I'm playing a foot slogging army on Hammer and Anvil against double Hierodule Hive Guard, where like there's literally no way that I can win that game. Night Tom, thanks for your input, man. Have a good night. There's no way I can win that game. But you know what I did? I played the game until I realized that was my fate was sealed. So until that point where I knew I was definitely not going to win, I gave it my all. I did the best I could. I played the best I could. And then I think it was like his turn 3. He basically almost tabled me. And I was like, hey, well, it's my turn 3, and I have like 3 things on the board, and you have almost your entire army. So is there a point in playing this game right now? Like, I'm not enjoying this game because there's no point in me playing it. My whole army is basically dead. So we could have played out the game 2 more turns, and like me just being fucking grumpy about it. It was like pretty late in the night, I think, too, if I remember. I was pretty tired. And I just was like, I'm not enjoying this game. I don't want to play this game. So let's just talk it out. We shook hands, and I think I was like, okay, you get like 90. Like, we talked it out, and it was like 90 points. In that case, it's like, if I didn't want to play that game, if I said, hey, let's talk it out, and he was like, no, I'd have been like, okay, see ya. I would have grabbed my stuff and I would have left. There's nothing he could have done to stop me. Like, there's no way I was going to play those 2 turns. It was just not going to happen. So either we talk it out, or I just walk away. And again, it's like, this is not an event for anything. I'm already lost the game. In a win-loss-draw tournament, it wouldn't matter if I got 0 points. Like, give me 0 points. I don't give a fuck. I'm not playing that game. I'm just not doing it, right? Now, is it fair to my opponent if I end the game early, say, okay, I'm walking away at turn 3, so you get no more points for the game because I don't want to play you? Is that fair to the opponent? I don't think so. I think it's fair to say, okay, well, because I don't want to play this game, right? The loser, I don't want to deprive you of the points you would get if I played the game. So let's talk it out. Let's get those points. Let's give you those points because that's only fair, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, where there is something wrong with it is when there is like a winning opponent intimidating another opponent, saying, hey, let's just end the game. I'm going to win this and give me these extra points. Or as you mentioned,
to be the choice of the other player.
Or as you mentioned, not actually talking it out, like logically, like just like you mentioned that engage in all front scenario, you had 3 units. Like there was things where I was like, what could I score? Like physically score? And if those score points are easy, then I would get them, right? Like I could get the secondary very easily. I would just like do nothing, right? Imagine if my models were not on the board. Like what could you get? Or imagine in this turn you killed all my models, right? Or in the next 2 turns, I don't roll any dice, you just kill my models. There was even times where I was like, I don't know if you kill that thing, so let's just roll that quick thing. Like he'd be like, okay, I think my Hive Guard kills your knight in my bottom of my turn. I'm like, well, I don't know, that's 50-50. So why don't you just roll that quickly? I'll watch you roll it and I'll make my saves. And if it kills it, we'll give you the points. But if it doesn't kill it, I don't get you don't get the points. So we'll still kind of roll out a few of the things that are maybe more on the like borderline. But in general, like you just get the points, right? That I think is okay. But again, you don't want to give points that they wouldn't have normally gotten, right? I also think maybe a solution to that is call a judge and they can kind of work through it together and see your logic and hear like, hey, get a judge. Judge comes to the table and you guys kind of talk through what you want to do and say, okay, this is what this opponent doesn't want to play. I think I get these points. He agrees. What do you think, judge? And then the judge kind of looks at it, says, yeah, that all makes sense. That's all logical. It's all possible and doable. We'll grant you those points, right? That's the way I think the talkouts should go. But under no circumstances should players be forced to finish games they don't want to play. That is awful. That is an awful experience. And the thing is, you can't make them. As I said, if the guy was like, no, I don't want to talk it out, I literally been like, cool, I'm packing up my models and I'm gonna walked away. I'm like, I'm not playing. I'm just not playing. Like, unless what are you gonna hold me at gunpoint, make me play this game? Like, you can't do it, right? So what's the solution to that? Is when players don't want to play the game, there has to be some remedy so that the player that won isn't getting fucked, and that's where the talking out has to come in. But I think the losing player has to initiate the talk out.
Yeah,
the losing player should want to talk it out. Like if the winning player, right?
The number one thing to think about, I think that the key of this is that like this game is a foregone conclusion, however it ends up. I think the number one thing to think about when you are talking about your game, when you are thinking about how your game is going to finish, is that you do it in a way that the score will not affect other people's games.
Right.
That if you're pretty darn sure that this game was going to end up 85-50, talk it out, get somewhere close to there. Don't give yourself 100. Don't submarine. Put yourself where you would normally be in an event, and that way you will not affect other people's tournament journeys.
Right.
That's, I think, the biggest thing. Or like a lot of people have been going to, and like they did at Orlando, you do win path.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what your points are.
Right. And the thing is, I think at
matter.
that point, that thing you're discussing, that like making sure you're not screwing, that's where the judge comes in. Right. So if you're going to talk it out, concede a game, just call a judge. He can be there, third party, arbitrate it, make sure everything's happening fair. Again, you don't give yourself 100 points if like, you wouldn't have gotten them otherwise. You miss your first 3 engages, you don't give yourself a 15 engage, right?
Yep.
You know, like so that needs to be part of it, but there needs to be a way for that to happen, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, next topic, Charity Hammer. So, for those of you that don't know, me and Alex were at Charity Hammer 3 weekends ago. Not last week, the weekend before. 2 weekends ago. I had a great time. I want to send a huge thank you to Colin Sherman. I did post it on my Facebook. Big thank you to him, but he puts in a fuck ton of work to organize Charity Hammer. He has us out at his place, so we literally like slept on his couch. He opens up his home to us. He puts in a lot of organizing work throughout the year just to get everyone organized, the players. Like his wife and his dogs and his like puts up with all 30 gamers worth of like bullshit and like invading their house. They feed us, and I'm really grateful that I've been a part of it the last 3 years. And I just want to give him a huge thank you for like keeping me involved in it. It's really made me feel still not relevant, but just part of the community again. It really reminded me that like why I love this community and like how great of a community we are. We ended up raising around $30,000. I think donations are still open for another few weeks. So if you guys are interested, check out charityhammer.com. You can check out the links there. Donate. I think our goal is to try to get to 40,000. So if you haven't donated, all the content I believe is still available on the various Twitch channels. I think it was Best in Faction, Art of War, YouTube, and Frontline Gaming, I think, restreamed the games. Definitely check out some of the finals games in the tournament between John Lennon and his opponents.
Yeah,
there's just like games where you're like, oh, I'm seeing like really high level play. They're just excellent games to watch. And the great thing is, even some of the other non-tournament games, there's lots of teaching moments for players. Like, I know me and Mark Perry's game, we were playing at like fucking 2 a.m. I can't remember. And we played Chaos on Chaos, Emperor's Children versus World Leaders, very classic. And we, throughout the game, were both playing at a high level, but like we both made some mistakes, but we were like, it was like mistakes that like we wouldn't normally make. We were tired, so we'd like I didn't zone out an inch on a deep strike, so he's like, hey, I'll make sure to fix that. Like we were helping each other play the way that we know we can play, but then we were also talking through what the things we were doing on stream to help players that were watching learn some of those like high level strategies. Like, why were we doing things? Like, why was I holding a unit in reserve like this? Why was I not committing earlier? And that was one of my favorite games of the weekend versus Mark, because not only is he a great guy, I love playing Mark, but he's just he's a genius, especially when it comes to chaos. And he like I was like playing that game, and like first 2 turns, I'm like, this game's in the bag. And it ended up being like a really close game. Like I ended up picking up like 600 or 700 points of his army in the first few turns, and he had very little left. And just with like the remaining like 1,000 points, he almost came back and won the game. World Leaders fighting 4 times when they have a strike last is fucking scary as fuck. Like it's like, oh, you strike last? I'm like, yeah, no problem. He had 10 berserkers, 2 units of 5, charged Bellicor, and he got a strike last on him with his jank. And so they got 4 combats against him, and they brought him down to like 1 wound. And then obviously Bellicor turns around and wipes out both units of berserkers. That's what he does. I killed 1 and then fought again and fight twice. So like 2 could play that game, Mark. So killed both units, but like that was like the game like hinged on that combat, because had he picked up Bellicor, I think he wins that game. And like I didn't see that. Like I didn't see the power of that. I was like, they're -1 to hit. They're not getting rerolls. They're like wounding on 5s. But like 5 berserkers puts out like 40 attacks or something like that. So it was like 160 attacks or something ridiculous. And in the end, I had like 2 wounds left, and I was like fucking clenching my butt, because I was like, no way, they killed Be'lakor. Literally, almost killed Be'lakor. Had I rolled it a little bit worse. But it was a really good game. He played World Eaters with 1 wound. I played Emperor's Children with 1 wound, and I was like, man, these armies are gonna be so good when they get 2 wounds. Um, so that was a really good game. I had a great game against who else did I play? I don't know. Any highlights for you, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. I got to play Tim Penny with his like all penitent engine list, and that was just like a weird, fun game of kind of absurd rules. Like Tyrants just don't have the ability to kill that army fast enough, and he was like just picking my stuff up. I was getting smashed on like models on the board, and then I was like, okay, so this game's probably over. We'll see what happens. I'll try and dig for points. And then he rolls a 1 on Celestine, and Celestine doesn't get back up, and she's like in my teeth. And he hypes it up too, right? He's like, "Here we go!" Pulls the dice like way back, lobs it, 1. Yes. So I won that game by like 5 or 6 points, and it was just fun playing Tim as well. He's a really good guy. And then another game, I think this was a good one for me personally. I was playing against Bird with his Ultramarines, and that was my last game while I was there. That was the one where I won the RTT, and for me that just felt really good because I finally felt like I was really playing well. I think Thomas played it well as well, but I just like pulled that army apart. Like by basically turn 2, he realized like, oh, there's nothing I can do to win this game, even though he still had like 1,500 points on the board. So it was kind of cool to just be like, okay, yes, I am playing the army how it's supposed to be played, and it felt good to play at a really high level. But yeah, all the games that I played were great.
Yeah. And shout out to all the guys that attended. I know it wasn't cheap. Just to put it in perspective, for the Canadians, we spent around $120 for a COVID test pre-border. Some of us flew there, so you're talking about 200 or 300 more dollars. Another $150 COVID test coming back into Canada, and then transport. Like all in all, just to actually travel to Charity Hammer probably cost me about $600. And there's a lot of people that flew in from Florida, all over the states. And so I'm not saying that they didn't have costs either, but it's really cool to see people fly out there for on their own dime, and obviously for a great cause. And I was just happy to see, like, I hadn't seen John Lennon for 2 years, like, and I haven't seen Colin for 2 years. I haven't seen Peter the Falcon for 2 years. Like, it's been a long time due to COVID that I haven't seen like people that I had really good relationships with in the 2019 season. I would see at events all the time and like have drinks with, like, it was really good to see everyone. And that was like felt really nice too. Is just like give Mark Berry, like, give a big bear hug, right? Like, I was excited to see those guys. I was super excited to seeing Nick as well. I like Nick, so I was excited to see him as well. So yeah, so that was a
Yeah,
great event. I already looking forward to next year. I'm hoping I get invited again next year, so I got to start fucking pulling my competitive shit together. And that's gonna start with Attack X, which is our first big event in about 3.5 weeks. Whether it happens or not is unknown. We'll know in about 2-3 weeks whether it happens. Like literally the week before the event, they're going to announce whether or not we're going to be going into stage 4 of restrictions, which allows us to have an event like that. And if not, the whole event's canceled. So I'm not thinking about that. Like, I'm thinking as if it's going on, because I'm just trying to be positive. But yeah. All right. Let's talk about Thousand Suns Grey Knights initial thoughts. So I'm going to be, for those of you interested, tomorrow night on my hobby chat, I'm going to be going into a much deeper dive into the Codex, Thousand Suns specifically. So if you guys want to know my thoughts on the lovely Thousand Suns book and what are some of the lists I'm going to be running, check out my hobby stream tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific. But for now, initial thoughts on these 2 books.
I've really liked what I've heard about Thousand Suns so far, which is actually more what I've been paying attention to. I don't really care about Grey Knights much. I'm just not a Marine player. I realize Thousand Suns are Marines, but I've always found Chaos a little more interesting. It looks like they toned down some of the stuff that was being used before, like duplicity and magic. Magnus's role seems to have changed a little bit. It's still just like the fate dice mechanic is cool. It still is just like a mortal wound machine. I don't know. I'm pretty excited how they look and how they play. Balance level seems solid. It's not Admech or Drakari, thank the Lord.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, we'll talk about that as well. Any kind of standout, like, I don't know, as a Tyranid player or someone that plays cults, anything that you're like, does the book, either of those books give you any sort of like pause? Or are you like, okay, there's things I need to watch out for?
I mean, the mortal wound thing doesn't really bother me much. I'm one of the few armies right now that has a bunch of cheap garbage to throw out and absorb a lot of that, or actually have some of the denies to get rid of it. Like with Shadow in the Warp, I've got a lot of -1s getting thrown around, so it's not too bad. I've always said that the Tyranid Thousand Suns matchup is usually Tyranid favored,
Yeah,
but we'll see if that continues onwards.
we'll see at Attack
Yeah,
X.
that's right. I'll see you at the top table.
Well, it's gonna be weird when there's like 4 top tables.
Yeah, is it only 5 rounds?
Yeah, it's 5 rounds, 130 players. So we might not
All
even
right.
play each other. I'm gonna submarine just like I talked about to dodge you. uh, oh, I'm not. I'm gonna just go for it because that's the only way to win the event. And
That's right.
I
That's what
can't
I
let
did
you win a
last year.
third year in a row. That's my one goal
That's right.
to prevent you from winning 3 years in a row. So, yeah, I'm honestly, guys, I'm happy with the Thousand Suns book because it's a big improvement over the 8th edition book in almost every way. Data sheets are improved, stratagems are greatly improved, cabal points are awesome. The Legion upgrades are mostly great. Is it Admech Drukhari level? Nope. Is there some builds in there that I think can be very skewed in certain matchups? Absolutely. I think some armies are just not gonna be able to handle the amount of mortal wounds. Like I'm like scared as a Marine player. If you're a Marine player going into Thousand Suns, like the amount of damage they can put out, they can literally just wipe your literally main defense, which is invulnerables and high toughness and wounds, doesn't matter. I think orcs actually play well into them against them, but against all that, just because they do have decent psychic, they have a lot of bodies. But again, the mortal wound output in a single psychic phase is scary. But also, I think the great thing is like they actually have other things now. Like Forge Fiends are actually good. Some of their Helldrakes are decent now. Scarab Cult Terminators are fucking awesome now, right? And they're going to be very hard to shift. So it's not just that they got more rules, but like their data sheets actually feel like they can compete in the meta against other things. Now, where my big disappointment is, and I think this goes with every 8th edition, 9th edition Codex, is they just suffer from lack of new data sheets. So they got the Infernal Master, but nothing else. They don't have a lot in there. There's really only 2 strong, like there's the Scarab Cult Terminators and there's the rubrics, but that's the only like Thousand Sunsy thing. Everything else is legacy data sheets from Chaos Space Marines, which I think are anything on a Predator chassis is just like doomed to be bad always. Like now there is some actual play. I think Vindicators actually got decent in Thousand Suns because they got a 2+, 5++, and I think that actually gives them a little bit of like play. That they're T8, right? So I think like 3 Vindicators, super cheap, running around, like just being annoying, like almost run them like Raiders, where you're just charging them into stuff and just shooting stuff, could be fun. The Rhinos actually are decent because they're the same price as normal Rhinos, but you get an Infernal Bolter, so AP2 bolters, and then you get 5++. So that's nice on your Rhinos. And then some of the stratagems and cabal points can create some scary psychic phases, but the thing with psychic is it's dice based, right? Like now everything is dice based, but when you're talking about where you're talking about where the strength of any book is, for me it's like the stratagems are good, but like if your entire strategy is based around a 2d6 dice like mechanic, right? Now it's one thing when I have lots of dice and things will average out, but when I'm rolling 2d6, that's like a lot more swingy than like a lot of other mechanics, right? And like it's just based on these 2d6 rolls. You can get a lot of like bad. I've had psychic phases that have lost me games. Like one bad psychic phase can lose you a game, right? And it happens. Now there's ways to mitigate it with cabal points. There's ways to kind of soften that a little bit with +1 to cast. But ultimately, in a 5-game, 6-game tournament, you're gonna have one bad psychic phase. And if you have that bad psychic phase and it doesn't perform the way that you want, you don't get that warp time off. You don't get that smite off. You do one less mortal wound than you need and don't kill something. All of a sudden, the game swings really quickly the other way because you're so reliant on that. So I would have liked to see another unit or 2 in them. I would have liked to see things like, I don't see any reason they can't have like Lord Discordance. I don't see any reason that they can't have some of the other data sheets from like Chaos Space Marines that they don't have access to. They're like some sort of Thousand Suns Havoc unit would be amazing, like a unit of just 5 Soul Reaper guys or 5. I don't know. You guys like come up to GW. That's not my job. But there's like I would have liked to see 1 or 2 more exclusive Thousand Suns units. Like look at Death Guard, right? They got so many units that are exclusive to their like Legion, and we have basically 2 plus Zangors. And the Zangor Enlightened got really bad. Like they actually got, I think they're about the same, but like they're still not great. They just got cheaper. But they weren't given it, like if they had made Zangor Lightning solid and Zangors as good as they were before, I think we have a really strong book. But the Zangors got nerfed, and the Zangor Lightning are like, you know, the bows are kind of nifty, but they're 1 shot, 1 damage, right? If they're damage 2 or they got 2 shots, now we're talking. But again, they're just on that cusp. Also, things like all the relic weapons are garbage. Like you get Drukhari with things like the Jin Blade, AP3, flat 3 damage, like it's crazy shit. And the Thousand Suns, all the weapons are just useless. Like there's no good relic weapons. A Demon Prince with a sword is like the best weapon in the game, is in the book. The Demon Prince has got nerfed. Magnus, obviously, I think he's a fun piece, but he is not going to be viable in competitive games. He'll die to run round to double shooting Hive Guard like instantly.
He's no Mortarion.
No, I mean he lost his 3++. He lost his warp time, and he lost his and he got -1 damage instead. And like the only thing that made him viable in the past was you could deploy him far in the back away from threat, get the 3++ on him, right, and then shoot him 36 inches up the board. Or 32 inches up the board, right? Now you can go 16 inches and he doesn't have 3++. So you're always like, you're not able to like null deploy with him and kind of keep him out of harm's way. You're going to have to keep him either right on the line or in strategic reserve, essentially. Yeah. So anyways, I'll talk about it more, kind of go in depth more in like stratagems and kind of some of the combos and stuff in tomorrow's show. But Grey Knights, I don't have a ton of thoughts on. Ultimately, I think they're probably around the same power level as Thousand Suns, which are probably around the same power level as things like Death Guard, Dark Angels, that kind of stuff in the end. But yeah.
Poor Dark Angels, though. I think Thousand Suns are going to shit on Dark Angels.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got Transhuman and all this stuff. I don't care. Here's 30 mortals. Get
yeah.
That
like the problem is like nothing I put on the table survives 6 Dark Lances. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like it just dies. And I kill a Raider a turn, so nothing survives 5 Dark Lances.
To be fair, though, that is everyone's problem right now.
Yeah.
That's why I can't run like Double Demon Karen anymore, because like Incidental Raider or Admech Last Chicken Shooting just like picks up all my big stuff. I don't get to. It's just like the Castellan meta back in the day. Does your vehicle have an invulnerable save? No? Okay, it doesn't get to be on the board anymore. It just doesn't exist in the meta. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. I think there's a big problem with the way that they've done that kind of stuff to damage. It's made a lot of abilities like DR not useful. So for me, it should have been the last cannon rule on the old treat rolls of 1 and 2 as a 3. Like that would have been how I would have written the rule.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like 3 to 6 damage. Yeah. The fact that like you get basically 4 to 6 damage minimum means like,
or even just like, is there something wrong with 2d3? That way you could bottom it 2 and average 4.
Yeah.
Like now minimum is 4, you average 5, and 6 is just as likely. Like 2d3, I think, gives you a bit of stability, but not like.
Yeah.
Oh shit!
That's something that's going to change, right? So they just need to adjust that on points. No. And then I think there's a bigger issue with Admech and Drukhari, which we're going to talk about next. It'll be our kind of last topic. So before we get any questions, so. First, congratulations to Richard Siegler for winning the first US Open with Combat Admech. He had a very interesting list. And I want to kind of just go over 2 kind of things from last week's event. So we had about 5 events, and here are the winners. So I'm going to read you the top 2 in each of these events. We had Cult Mechanicus and Sisters win the Orlando. Orcs and Sisters win War Games for Warriors. Dark Eldar and Mechanicus win Flying Monkey Con. White Scars and White Scars win the W4 GT. Drukhari and Drukhari win the Auckland GT. Cult Mechanicus. And then Death Guard Demons by TJ coming in at the hobby place. And then Drukari winning the Glasshammer GT. Drukari and Chaos Demons Wet Coast GT. Drukari and Demons Death Guard winning the Common Ground Games. And both those Demons players, so like Enos Wilson, who's like he's like an ETC Titan. So like these aren't like slouches. So what did you hear a lot of? Drukari, Sisters, Admech, Orcs. They're winning. They basically won almost every event last week. And when we look at their TWIP, so for those that don't know, TWIP is a statistic. It stands for tournaments in winning position. And basically what that means is how often is a faction in the position where its first loss is the last kind of game of the event. And Drukari and Cult Mechanicus have a 20%, 24% TWIP, which means 20% of the time in any event, any given event, Drukari is like 4-0 or 5-0 in a 6-round event. And Cult Mechanicus is 4-0 or 5-0 in an event before they lose. The next highest faction is 7%. So what that means is, and that is Death Guard, and then Sisters are at around 6%. But what that means is that these two factions, even after their nerfs, are performing far and away better than like every other faction, and they have win percentages to show. And when you look at win percentage of say like Cult Mechanicus and Drukari, they're both in the mid 60s, and that's with those other factions. So that's like, and most of their losses are against other Drukari or against other Cult Mechanicus. So it's like the two sharks are eating each other, but then they're also eating everyone else, and no one's eating the sharks. And my concern is that we've already had a balance pass for both these books. I think everyone agrees they're still not where they need to be. And we don't think we're going to see any sort of balance pass for these books probably until chapter approved. If that, we're not going to get like another FAQ that nerfs them further. If we do, I will be fucking shocked. But from my perspective, we probably won't get anything until at least chapter approved 2022, which based on this year's release schedule, which was what, in like February or March, when it was maybe April, something like that, is at least another 8 months away. And the other thing is, the fucking worst part about chapter approved is, guess what? When it comes out, it'll already be out of date, because we're going to have a bunch of books in between when it goes to print and when it's released. And in that time, like other broken factions will get released, which means the whole chapter approved points system is stupid. So Alex, what are your thoughts? What can we be done? Should we be worried? Is this the end of the world?
It's not fun, which is really a big problem. Admech and Drukari are far too good. I think we won't see a patch for either of those until we see one or the other of those two factions win LVO, which I assume is what's going to happen. Unless something else comes out in the meantime that is that ridiculous, but I don't actually think that's going to be the case. Yeah, the system is inherently broken. We know that. It's really unfortunate too, because it just seems to be these two codexes. Like I said, like Sisters are really good. I think Orcs are pretty good, but all of them are like such a far cry from the rest. So if we didn't have those two in the meta, I think we'd just be fine right now. Like everything would be no problem. We saw, I can't remember the exact win path, but we saw the Admech player in the GT for Charity Hammer go like really deep and finally get brought down by John Lennon. So, and this is nothing against the guy who's playing him. I think the guy who was playing him is a very good player, and he was a great opponent, wonderful to play against. But even he admitted, like, I should not have made it as far as I did. And it literally took, again, what a lot of people would agree with, like, is the best player in the world to actually beat him. That's not okay. The best player in the world playing the third best book in the game to bring down the best book in the game is absurd. Like, that should never be the case.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's actually really unhealthy for the game that like this continues for like much longer. I'm at a point now where, and I'm sure you feel the same, like if like, you know, I played Brandon in our league game and he bought Drukari and I was just like, I'm playing Thousand Suns, I played Thousand Suns Death Guard Soup. All right. And you know, not the optimal list. It's old Thousand Suns Death Guard just so I can run. Oh no, I ran Thousand Suns Nurgle so I could soup in PBCs and Contemptors because I was like, that's the only way I might have a chance. And even that, like bringing a list basically tailored to kill Dark Eldar, it was like so tough. And it's like, you know, was there mistakes made? Could I have won the game? Sure. I mean, there's definitely things both players could have done, but like, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't take me basically list tailoring, and he bringing like a take all comers list, and I just barely still lose. Like, it's not a thing, right? So I think it's a big issue for the competitive game, and I think it's just oppressive when you start like on the board and you just like the game is already a foregone conclusion. And I hope GW does more. I hope they do more to fix this. Now I didn't see John and Richard's finals game. I heard it was pretty good. I think it was 84-86, so super close. And I know it's gated on the Games Workshop Twitch, so you can't actually go watch it, which is unfortunate. But like, you know, and I'm happy that Richard came out of kind of semi-retirement. He has been playing events a lot to smash down John, because I would have been upset if John won another event. Not that I don't think he should win. It's nice to see someone else win. And congrats, obviously, all the guys at the Art of War. Basically swept that event and took home all the gold. So that's pretty cool to see. And it shows like
100% win rate.
Yeah, and it shows like at the end of the day, you know, players ask like, what do I do to get better? Well, look at how many games they play, how many reps they play against good players with different lists, trying out different things, different scenarios. Like, that's the best way to get better. Like, no doubt there are great players on the West Coast, in the Northeast, whatever, that coat probably beat some of those guys. But and you know, obviously Orlando's in their backyard, so the whole trap house basically shows up. But with that said, the reason that they're able to do so well is because of the games that they play, and like against other really good players. And so there's just there's a reason that they're doing so well. It's because, you know, even through the pandemic, they were still playing, right? So, all right, Alex, any final thoughts? Oh, sorry, questions. We got to take questions really quickly. All right, so we already asked Sam Lemon's question about the 40K roadmap and the ideal scenario. That was what we answered. There is a question by Demon of Science asking, is there a way of making Spartan and Sakaran tanks competitive? Are Rhinos full of Poxwalkers the best way for Death Guard to reinforce objective holding in the midfield? Well, first of all, you can't put Poxwalkers in Rhinos. They're only for Bubonic Astartes. And it feels... yeah, so you can't do that. Sorry. Spartan Sakaran tanks. I actually don't even know what those tanks do. So let me pull
Those are Forge World.
Yeah.
I think the Sakaran tanks aren't bad. They fill a bit of a niche role. I think the problem right now is that they are just overshadowed by Dreadnoughts. The Sakaran tanks, if I'm remembering correctly, the ones I'm thinking about, it's like a fairly similar shooting to like the Baby Knights with the autocannons, like the G3 shot autocannons. They're fast, they shoot well, but it's just not the same as having probably 1.5 Dreadnoughts for the cost that now have a -1 damage reduction. I think the Dreadnoughts are just better.
Yeah, so I'm looking at them right now. So there's 3 Sakarans. There's the Battle Tank, the Punisher, and the Venator. First of all, the cheapest one is 180 points or 170 points, which is already more expensive than a lot of your Dreadnoughts. Things like the Punisher. So the Punisher comes with basically a Punisher cannon, so heavy 18. The Venator comes with, let me see here, a laser cannon, which is heavy 3, strength 12, AP 3, D6 damage.
D6.
It goes to 6 though. But yeah, it goes to D6. But if you don't move, it goes to flat 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just nasty. And then the Battle Tank comes with a special auto cannon, which is AP strength 6, heavy 6, strength 7, AP 2, 3 damage. And all these vehicles can have sponson weapons, which add up to 30 to 40 points. So you're talking for a sponsored version of these to be about 200 to 210 points. The thing is, they don't have invulnerables. They're all T7, and they have 14 wounds, so they're not super tough. Now, this is where maybe I could see some play in, say, like a Thousand Suns list with a built-in 5+, and like maybe some of the buffs to make, like, for instance, that Battle Tank at 180, making the autocannon up to strength 8 and AP 3. So it's a strength 8, AP 3, heavy 6. That's kind of nice. But again, for that 180 points, are you better with a Contemptor, Volkite Contemptor? You know?
Yeah, with damage reduction.
With damage reduction? It's hard to say. They do have 2+ saves.
Isn't it also a core thing?
Sorry?
Isn't it also a core thing? Like the tanks aren't
they
core,
don't have core, obviously. They do have smokescreen, which is nice. Which is cool. So, I don't know. I think there is definitely some play there, but the problem is when you just get into the efficiency, like the data sheets are good, but they just don't have the efficiency, I don't think, to make them super useful.
Yeah.
And then what does a Spartan do? Do Chaos have Spartans?
It's a good
Oh, here
question.
you go. 460 point Lord of War. Jesus.
Oh, that's the meme that the Falcon brought in his game. That's like the 8 las cannons on a Land Raider chassis, basically.
Yeah, so you can give it 2 laser destroyers or 2 las cannons.
Yeah.
The laser destroyers are nice. Heavy 3, AP4, D3 plus 3. But again, 20 wounds, T8, 2 plus save for 460 points. I mean, that's a lot of points.
It's a lot of fucking
Yeah,
points.
so I don't necessarily think they have. Oh, and they can also hold 25 models. So that could be some play there, but honestly, I just think they're too expensive for what they do. JHNLK asked Death Guard or Death Watch. Today I would say Death Watch. Dwarnar asks, you probably have gone over this, but what are your thoughts on Boys in Blue and Grey Knights? We talked about that already. Thoughts on Orcs? Honestly, I've only played them once so far. I'll probably have some more thoughts down the road, but the Squigga Buggies are good, and the kill rigs are really good. The Sorcerer, Las Cannon, Chariot, Beasts. So I think some of I think overall the books changed a lot. Like you're gonna see a lot more vehicle heavy lists, a lot less boy spam, but and a lot more of like different types of data sheets. Before, like you get away with like 120 boys and a few characters. But I think nowadays it's gonna be more like a variety mix of stuff. Mech guns got nerfed, thankfully.
I think Orc players are really having to figure out like what they're actually going to do with the Codex. I think of any of the new codexes, like if you were playing Drukhari before, and then the new Codex comes out, you basically just got to go, hey, everything that I already owned got a whole bunch better. Sweet. If you're an Orc player, you're like, okay, my 120 point army is probably dead. I've got to completely rethink how I play the game.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of it. I played Rich Kilton, which was a blast at Charity Hammer, and he played like triple rocket truck and commandos and like a lot of like, it was almost like an MSU Orc army. He was like deep striking into my back corner and stuff, and I thought that was a really cool list, and it seems very strong. So I think there's still a lot of play there.
Yeah, like
It's just taking like, a mental shift for Orc players.
yeah, like a Fire Raptor I actually don't mind for 340 with a 5++, and like you can give it +1 AP to like its autocannon, Hellstrike launcher, and Adventure Bolt Cannon, +1 to hit, 1,000 suns, and then +1 strength as well. That's actually got some play, I think. That's a lot of investment. Like it's not whenever you think of that stuff, you can't just think of like the 340. You got to think of okay, well the character support, the buffs, all that stuff. Could that be better spent on other units? Yeah, I do like a Fire Raptor hitting on 2s, causing lots of trouble.
The problem still is the elephant in the room at AdMech and Drukhari. And you started on the board, and the AdMech player goes, "Well, you can just remove that now."
Yeah,
like,
that's the problem. That's ultimately the problem in my eyes as well. Is just like, and a lot of it's damage too, which means against like Death Guard you're not doing a lot. Against other dreadnoughts you're not doing a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there might be some play there, but ultimately I think you're probably better off with like cheaper dreadnoughts and stuff like that. There's a question in the chat. What was it? Let's see here. Forge will get to fire up your gunship a psychic fort. Yep. Did they already talk about Forge Fiends or Hellbrutes and Thousand Suns? I haven't. I will be talking about it tomorrow. I think Forge Fiends are excellent, and I'm going to be running one. I actually just bought 2 today, or got 2 today. I bought them last week, and they arrived today. And then Hellbrutes I think are okay, but like ultimately I'd still probably rather have a Contemptor. I think AP1 Contemptors that strength 7 are actually really nice. Like that'll just gat down Raiders.
Yep.
Right, because then they're going on a 5+, and they're getting wounding on 3s. So all of a sudden, like Contemptor, maybe a Contemptor could probably kill 2 Raiders potentially easily with +1 to hit as well.
Split fire.
Right?
Yeah, because you still have prescience, right?
Yeah, prescience. So plus a few mortal wounds, like that's a lot of dead Raider. So I do really like that. Yeah, we know that they gave Arcana Stars to all the Forged stuff, which is nice. But again, I think like 2 Contemptors is better, personally. 150 points versus like 115 or 130.
And range 45.
The 45-inch
like,
range actually is like, people underestimate that, but it lets you really null deploy, sit back in your deployment zone, and just shoot across the table. And a lot of things actually seem to have gone to shorter ranges, like 36 to 24. So the 45-inch range actually gives them like a huge amount of threat. It means almost basically entire board on modern tables, no small tables.
Yeah. It's why the Ultramarine list is so good. It's just autocannons and contemptors at the yin yang. So you're like, oh, okay, well, I redeploy with Ultramarines, and my whole army just like backlines and shoots you off the board.
Yeah. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. and on Tuesday at Wednesday at 6 p.m. with some hobby chat, and then Thursday the best overall show is back with David Koska. I believe he's back. He might be driving across country, who knows? But I will have a co-host. And then we'll be streaming on no streams Friday to Saturday, Sunday this week because I am off being a degenerate. But next week, Politics and Plastic will return after a long hiatus. We're going to be talking gatekeeping. We're going to be talking submarining. We're going to be talking all sorts of fun stuff. I got lots of episodes planned. It's been great to have a few weeks off. It's kind of recharged my batteries for streaming, but also my hobby batteries as well. So lots of hobby stuff coming up. Make sure to follow us on Twitch and YouTube. Like and subscribe to the channel. Hit a thumbs up if you guys are enjoying the content. Really appreciate all the support so far. And yeah, let's have a good week. Alex, thanks so much for joining me. And everyone else, have a great night. That's it.